Previously made videos on the state parks of Long Island, New York City, and the Palisades region, I would like to continue this series as it coincides in 2024 with the centennial of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation, the agency responsible for New York's state parks. The region that we're talking about is the Hudson River Valley. Having spoken previously about the Palisades side of the river, we will now talk about the Taconic side. But as with everything else on social media, it's good to get comments, followers, and feedback. And I already got some comments about a few sites on the Palisades side, which I missed in my previous video, so I'd like to include them this time. Fort Montgomery State Historic Site. This fort was built in March of 1776, commanded by General George Clinton, who fought against Parliament and the British King. He also later became the first Patriot governor of New York State. Fort Montgomery and its companion, Fort Clinton, faced each other across Popolopan Creek at the Hudson River. Fort Clinton is part of Bear Mountain State Park, and Fort Montgomery was much larger, but perhaps forgotten. It was here that a combined garrison of nearly 700 colonial soldiers prepared for the British advance. On October 6th of 1777, a force of 2,100 loyalists, Hessians, and British regulars arrived, led by Lieutenant General Sir Henry Clinton, no relation to George Clinton, attacking the forts from the landward side, keeping the forts for much of the war. After the war, the forts became ruins, largely forgotten until 1972 when they were designated as National Historic Landmarks and restored for the public. The other site in this region, not too far, that I forgot to mention, but I'll include now, is the General Henry Knox State Historic Park, built in 1754 as the John Ellison House. During the period of 1779 to 1783, it served as the headquarters for Generals Knox, Nathaniel Greene, Baron Frederick von Steuben, and Horatio Gates. In 1917, the Knox Headquarters Association was formed to raise funds for its purchase and preservation. And in 1922, the New York State Legislature accepted the house and grounds as a gift from that association. National Purple Heart Hall of Honor in New Windsor, New York, not too far from Newburgh. Its story goes back to May 12, 1995, when an article appeared in the Newburgh newspaper about an intent to build a Purple Heart Museum in Enfield, Connecticut, where the first recipient of the medal had come from. The article prompted Cornwall resident Patrick Morrison to write a letter to the editor, explaining why the museum should be in the Newburgh area. Morrison contended that events at historic Washington's headquarters in New Windsor justified the development of a Purple Heart facility at that site in the state of New York. Everett Smith, publisher of the New Windsor Sentinel newspaper, agreed, became an advocate for the National Purple Heart Hall of Honor to be in New York. The state agreed, because the first Purple Heart was awarded here in 1783, towards the end of the Revolutionary War. The hall opened to the public in 2006, located on the grounds of the New Windsor Cantonment State Historic Site. It was here in October 1782. Troops began to arrive, set up camp preparation for reclaiming New York City from the British. Quartering between 6,000 and 8,000 men, women, and children from New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And here they had 700 huts for the soldiers and a building called the Temple, with the official chaplain of the Army, Reverend Israel Evans, one of the first chaplains in the U.S. Army. A 167-acre tract of land was acquired by the town of New Windsor, and since 1936, the town and the National Temple Hill Association have striven to ensure the preservation of this site, the final winter encampment of the Revolutionary War that is now a state historic site. On that note, in the city of Newburgh is Washington's headquarters state historic site, acquired by the state of New York in 1850. It is the first publicly owned and operated historic site in the nation. It was here that Washington rejected the suggestion of an American monarchy, ended the Newburgh conspiracy that wanted to create a military government instead of a civilian government. It was here that the badge of military merit, the forerunner to the Purple Heart, was first awarded. And it was here that he circulated a letter to state governors outlining the key principles that Washington felt were necessary for the new republic. And it was also here that Washington announced the cessation of hostilities, which ended the Revolutionary War. So if major battles became national parks and skirmishes became state parks, famous military letters and documents and speeches became state sites. So every element of the revolution has a national, state, and local significance. In this case, a local site that became a state site. State Senate House State Historic Site, further upriver in Kingston, New York. This was built originally as the home of merchant Abraham van Gaspik, a descendant of Dutch settlers in the Hudson Valley. And it was here in 1777, New York State Senate met in Kingston to form a new state government. And in 1887, to recognize state Senate House roles in the formation of the state acquired the property and opened it to the public on its centennial in 1887. Now we cross over to Taconic side of the Hudson River Valley. And just like with all my previous videos, we'll begin with the state park that is closest to New York City. And that is Phillips Manor, that little stone house located to the daylighted Sawmill River. Sawmill River, known to the natives as Nepperhan River, flowed into the Hudson River until it was covered up for a parking lot in a park called Larkin Plaza in the 1930s. Daylighted in the early millennium, one of the most celebrated river daylighting projects in the nation. And the park next to it called Vanderdonk Park, after one of the early Dutch settlers. So a native river, a Dutch name for a park, and Phillips Manor facing this, one of our smaller state historic sites. It was built in the 1680s, sitting near the confluence of the Sawmill River and the Hudson River, facing the Palisades across. This Phillips Manor was a family known as the Patroons, Dutch landowners whose farm was worked by slaves and tenant farmers. It was once 200,000 acres, the richest family property in all of New York. At the outbreak of the American Revolution, the Phillips family were loyalists. So, for their own safety, they fled to England, and their sizable estate was subdivided between the farmers and land purchasers. The original house of the Phillips family later served as the Yonkers Village Hall and then a city hall from 1872 to 1908. When the new city hall was built, the house was preserved through the efforts of Eva Smith Cochran, who donated it to New York State to serve as a historic site, Phillips Manor in downtown Yonkers. Jay Heritage Center in Rye, a 23-acre estate that was one of two family properties of American founding father John Jay, both of them located in Westchester County. Jay lived from 1745 to 1829, a noted juror, diplomat, governor, and anti-slavery advocate. The property was saved from development in 1990 by its neighbors, and was then subdivided between the city of Rye, Westchester County, and the state. State being responsible for the Jay House and the Carriage House, maintained by a private conservancy for the benefit of the public, Jay Heritage Center. Old Croton Aqueduct State Historic Park. Yeah, just like the national park system, which has national monuments, national battlefields, national historic sites, and national parks, we have state historic parks, state historic sites, and state parks. The Old Croton Aqueduct is a linear park, sort of like the Westchester version of the High Line at 216 acres long. Construction of this aqueduct that runs underneath the trail began in 1837 under engineer John Bloomfield Jervis, who also built the High Bridge across the Harlem River. The plan called for a 41-mile aqueduct from the Croton River Dam to Manhattan, running water to serve New York City. It opened in 1842, and the old aqueduct functioned until 1965. 26.2 of its miles in Westchester County were acquired by the state in 1968. Among the things to see along this linear park is the double arch in Ossining, as you can see here, as well as the Croton Reservoir Dam with its cascade, and the Keeper's House in Dobbs Ferry, serving as a visitor chamber, and the Weir Chambers along the way, providing air to this aqueduct that's no longer in active use. This is the Old Croton Aqueduct State Historic Park. Hartsbrook Park and Preserve, which was acquired as parkland in 1999, jointly operated by Westchester County and the town of Greenburgh. This preserve was purchased by Henry Geisman in 1932, who made his fortune as the founder of the Gillette Safety Razor Company with more than 84 patents to his name, this prolific inventor. He purchased 135 acres of land here from George Christiancy, a former United States diplomat to Peru. Geisman was a bachelor until he was age 82 when he married his much younger wife, Catherine. In 1957, Geisman passed the title of this land to the New York Archdiocese, understanding that he and his wife could live there till the end of their lives, as long as they desired. Mr. Geisman lived here until 1974 when he died at the old age of 104. Catherine lived here till 1995. Subsequently, the Marion Woods Convent was on this site where aging nuns had their years of retirement, and it is now a state park where you can still find some of the Catholic buildings there and signs of Geisman's presence. FDR State Park, Franklin D. Roosevelt State Park in Yorktown Heights, next to the Taconic State Parkway. 761 acres, acquired in 1957, originally as Mohansic State Park, renamed for FDR in 1982 on the centennial of his birth. This was originally a state mental hospital, and fears that the mental hospital would pollute the water supply that ran down to New York City because it's part of the Croton watershed, resulted in the former Mohansic State Hospital becoming a state park. The swimming pool here, big enough for more than 3,500 bathers. And it was here before that we should know that before Roosevelt was president, he was the governor of New York State. And before he was governor of New York State, he was the chair of the Taconic State Parks Commission, developing a lot of the state parks in this region. As president during the Great Depression, he organized a program called CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, hiring single, unemployed 18 to 25-year-old men to work camps that developed parks throughout the nation, benefiting the public. And within this state park, there are remnants of the CCC work camp at Lake Mohansic. Books have been written about the Civilian Conservation Corps, including one called Roosevelt's Forest Army, and Roosevelt's role in development of parks called Rightful Heritage. The next park here, by the way, I should also note, this was later became county park and then a state park. Next park here, John J. Homestead. Located on 59 acres in the town of Katona, Jay's maternal grandfather was Jacobus Van Cortlandt, who purchased it from Chief Katona in 1700, and 2 generations later, it became the property of the Jay family, who married into the Van Cortlandts. It remained for 7 generations in the Jay family until 1959, when they gave it to the county, which then gave it to the state. So you can see names here like William Jay, and John Jay II, and another William Jay, and another John Jay, and Eleanor Jane Island, the last Jay to own the property, who then gave it to the state. Rockefeller State Park Preserve cobbled together a series of land properties that belonged to the wealthy Rockefeller family of the Standard Oil fortune, stretching from the Taconic State Parkway to the Hudson River, Sawmill River Parkway to the Hudson River. It is 1,486 acres. First acquired in 1983 and expanded in 1998 to include 80 acres of William Rockefeller's estate on the Hudson River, known as Rockwood Hall. The preserve was fashioned after the public landscapes ideas inherent in Central Park and the British carriage trails at the turn of the 19th century. So it feels like an Olmsted landscape designed for a private audience, but now open to the public. The mansion at Rockwood Hall was demolished in the 1940s, but the platform on which the old mansion stood is still there. Notice the bridges within the preserve, very reminiscent of Central Park. Another element of this park is Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture, a sustainability farm that was pioneered by the Rockefellers, still supported by that family, though it's part of the state park, and open to the public for food tasting, including wine and restaurants within the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture at Blue Hill within Rockefeller State Park Preserve. Having spoken in the previous video about the Palisades State Parkway and its role in the development of state parks of the Palisades region, the Taconic State Parkway serves a similar function on this side of the Hudson River. It was first opened to traffic in 1925 and eventually reached its conclusion at Interstate 90 close to Albany in 1963. The chair of the Taconic State Park Commission, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, pioneered this parkway in the 1920s, arguing that it should be built along the Taconic Ridge, in contrast to Robert Moses, who wanted it to be on the Hudson River. What Moses and FDR did agree on was the architect, Gilmore Clark, who designed the rest stops, the overlooks, and the curves on this highway. Gilmore Clark also built a lot of New York City's parks, including Flushing Meadows and Queens. Taconic State Parkway was built as an extension north of the Bronx River Parkway. And I wouldn't drive here at night. There's no shoulders, there's no light, there's very dangerous curves. It's a parkway designed for visual scenery during the day, and sure has that. It connects to, as I mentioned, Bronx River Parkway, and also a smaller Bear Mountain Parkway connecting to Bear Mountain Bridge. One of the parks along the Taconic State Parkway, whose signs you'll see along the road, is Donald J. Trump State Park, 436 acres of 2 separate properties, French Hill and Indian Hill. Donald J. Trump purchased the two properties in an estate sale in 1998, hoping to build a $10 million private golf course, but the local towns and villages were against it. So the Donald then wanted to unload the properties, donating them to the state in exchange for tax benefits. Part of the stipulation was that Donald Trump's name must appear on the signs for the park along the highway and at the entrance to the park. But unlike the Rockefellers and the Harrimans, the Donalds had no interest in maintaining this park or contributing to this park. He gave it to the state and then did nothing else. Being politically unpopular, the state also did very little with this park. And when it was found that the remnants of buildings on this park had asbestos, those building remnants were demolished, leaving very little human history on these two sites. But it should be known that almost a century before Donald Trump, there was another owner of this property at French Hill, and that was William Delavan Baldwin, president of the Otis Elevator Company in Yonkers, who owned the 150-acre French Hill. He's also the first president of the Westchester County Parks Commission, 1922-1925. In 1928, he donated more than 25 acres along the edge of his property for the construction of the Bronx River Parkway extension that became Taconic State Parkway. Delavan Baldwin died in his estate here in 1930. The French Hill has also got its name because there were French soldiers here during the Revolution in support of the Patriot cause. The Indian Hill portion is much larger, but has less history, straddling the borders of Putnam and Westchester County. There have been proposals by the state to remove Trump's name from this park, but so far, it's been a legal question. As for Donald Trump's MAGA base, they also seem to have no interest in contributing to this park, so certainly no hope here of a presidential library. Donald J. Trump State Park, which does not even appear on the state park website, maintained by the staff of the nearby FDR State Park, also president. Hudson Highlands State Park has a very popular Breakneck Ridge, a popular site for hikers, as well as remnants of the Stern and Cornish estates, deep in the forest here, and Lake Surprise, which has been a Jewish summer camp going back to 1902, serving initially the immigrant generation of the Lower East Side in this lake tucked inside the valley within Hudson Highlands State Park Preserve at 7,550 acres, acquired in 1970. The north section is Breakneck Ridge along the Westchester-Putnam border, and the south section is a mountain called Anthony's Nose at 886 feet. In 1917, Edward Joel Cornish and his wife Selina Bliss Carter Cornish acquired 650 acres here, called Northgate, from diamond merchant Sigmund Stern. In the early 1910s, they had an estate here with a mansion, garage, swimming pool, gardens, and other buildings. Just a few years after construction, Mrs. Stern passed away. Stern sold the estate to the Cornishes, who summered here in 1916. A year before his death in 1938, Edward Cornish desired to protect this estate from commercial activities that were occurring on other nearby mountains. Cornish wanted to donate this land to the state, but the state could not imagine this land serving as a park, even though today it's so popular with hikers and mountain climbers. They simply wanted to protect the mountain against quarrying. The Cornish estate's heirs then sold the land in 1963 to Central Hudson Gas and Electric, who wanted to make a power plant here, similar to the Con Ed's proposal for a power plant at Storm King Mountain. Both of these proposals, at Breakneck and at Storm King, were fought by conservationists who succeeded in preventing power plants on either side of the Hudson River. The park also includes Polypal Island with Bannerman's Castle. Bannerman was an arms merchant, and this was an ammunition depot, which blew up a couple of times in the 1920s and 30s, resulting in this, what looks like a romantic folly in the middle of the Hudson River. That was later acquired by the state in 1967, and the Bannerman's Castle Trust, a private organization, provides tours and restoration efforts at Bannerman's Castle on Polypal Island. Anthony's Nose faces against Bear Mountain and West Point, and Popolopan Creek with Bear Mountain Bridge, first bridge south of Albany that was built in the 1920s. Now one of many bridges, but this was the first bridge built south of Albany, in tandem with Bear Mountain State Park and the Harriman family. Anthony's Nose, and this part of the park includes the Appalachian Trail. Here inside Hudson Highlands State Park, you'll find historical signs talking about its human history, and the smallest transit station in the MTA system, Breakneck Ridge, open to just one door on the train by request, Breakneck Ridge Station. Currently, there's a proposal for the Fjords Trail, a waterfront trail along the Hudson River, so you can see Breakneck Ridge on the riverside. Clarence Fahnestock State Park also straddles the Appalachian Trail at 14,279 acres, completed in 1929. And speaking of which, if you hear music in the background, that is Appalachian Spring by New York-based classical composer Aaron Copland. Very fitting for this video. And the park was named by a prominent New York society family. Dr. Ernest Fahnestock donated this land to the state in 1929 in memory of his brother Clarence, an outdoorsman and hunter and a patriot who served as a doctor to American soldiers in France during World War I. Died shortly after the end of the war of the influenza pandemic. So that's why it is called the Clarence Fahnestock Memorial State Park. The park includes a freshwater beach, cross-country skiing, the Taconic Outdoor Education Center, and numerous opportunities for hiking here, popular among school trips, with the Taconic State Parkway running through the park at Clarence Fahnestock Memorial State Park in Carmel. The Appalachian Trail runs for 88 miles through New York State from the New Jersey border to the Connecticut border. It has the oldest section of the trail, which opened to the public on October 7, 1923, a short hike from Bear Mountain to Harriman State Park. The lowest point on the Appalachian Trail is within Bear Mountain State Park at just 124 feet above sea level. This is the trail stretches itself in total for more than 2,000 miles from Maine to Georgia. The highest point within New York State, Prospect Rock on the New Jersey border at 1,433 feet. And this is the Appalachian Trail, which covers Sterling Forest, Harriman, Bear Mountain, Hudson Highlands, and Clarence Fahnestock State Park with its own Metro-North station near Pauling on the Harlem line, which is also by request with just one door opening on the train. Wonder Lake State Park, as we continue to the north, located near Interstate 84. Wonder Lake State Park is 1,145 acres, acquired by the state in 1998. Constructed in the 1930s, this lake was part of a series of improvements to the terrain by A.L. Cushman, who owned a chain of bakeries in New York City. Cushman Bakeries folded in 1964 after 109 years in business. On Cushman Road was the summer home of television star and political activist Elizabeth Montgomery. After her death in 1995, her property was included in this state park. James Baird State Park is also on the Taconic State Parkway, and it's 655 acres, acquired by the state in 1939. James Baird is a former college football star turned engineer who worked for the Fuller firm on the Flatiron Building, the Lincoln Memorial, and the Folger Shakespeare Library. In 1939, Baird donated his farm in Pleasant Valley to the state, mostly a golf course with hiking, playground, and an outdoor stage with a turtle-themed playground, James Baird State Park in Pleasant Valley. Among the smallest sites within the Taconic region is Clinton House State Historic Site. It was built in 1765 and actively used from 1777 to 1783 when Poughkeepsie succeeded Kingston as the New York State capital city. Several branches of state government convened in this town. Governor George Clinton, not the Funkadelic one, but the Governor George Clinton, never lived or worked in this house, but still it was named in his honor. After a fire in 1783, General George Washington's New Windsor cantonment ordered carpenters to rebuild this important house. In 1900, the house had fallen into disrepair, and it was purchased by the Daughters of the American Revolution, who then presented it to Governor of New York, Theodore Roosevelt, in 1900, for the citizens of the state. Roosevelt later became vice president and president. This is the Clinton House State Historic Site, where George Clinton had never lived or worked. Walkway over the Hudson straddles the Taconic region and the Palisades region, built in 1888 at more than 200 feet above sea level, or the Hudson River level. It was abandoned in 1974 after a fire on the trestle. And just like the High Line of New York City, instead of being demolished, it was developed as a park, opening to the public in 2009. A great economic engine of tourism for the town of Beacon, and the town of Poughkeepsie, home to Vassar College, on the Taconic side of the Hudson River. Margaret Lewis Norrie State Park is one of three state parks clustered together, the other being Ogden Mills and Ruth Livingston Mills State Park and the Stroudsburg State Historic Site. Three state parks clustered together in Stroudsburg, New York. Here's their story. Margaret Lewis Norrie State Park, 356 acres, acquired in 1934, donated to New York State by Geraldine Morgan Thompson in memory of her sister, Margaret Lewis Norrie. That's Geraldine, and here is Margaret with the larger picture. Her family, the Livingstons, owned land next to this park that later became the Ogden Mills Ruth Livingston Mills State Park. Livingstons, of course, one of New York's colonial families, active in the American Revolution and the political and civic life of New York into the mid-20th century. Margaret was born in 1869 in Stroudsburg, descended from Francis Lewis, the signer to the Declaration of Independence from Queens, as well as Governor Morgan Lewis, and Alexander Hamilton, too, was among her ancestors. She fought for women's suffrage, died in 1927 at the age of 57. The Civilian Conservation Corps developed this park, building the Point Inn in 1937 as a place for dinners on the waterfront at the tip of Norrie Point. It later became an environmental center. In 1954, the Norrie Boat Basin opened to the public. Esopus Island in the Hudson River is included within this state park. The former Stroudsburg School, located on Post Road on the edge of the park, today serves as the headquarters of the Taconic region state parks. So just like a former Belmont mansion in Belmont State Park in Long Island is the headquarters of that park region, the Taconic Park region is based inside a very beautiful 19th century school building within Margaret Lewis Norrie State Park. Ogden Mills and Ruth Livingston Mills State Park is 750 acres, acquired by the state in 1937. Mills served as a Secretary of the Treasury under President Herbert Hoover. The Hoyt House is located within this park. Let's find you a picture. The Hoyt House was designed by Calvert Vaughn, a partner to Frederick Olmsted in developing Central Park. Built originally for Lydic Hoyt and his wife Blanche Livingston, Vaughn designed the winding, nearly mile-long entry drive to curve around the specimen trees within this estate turned park, affording visitors breathtaking vistas and pastoral scenery. Acquired from the heirs of the Livingstons by the state in 1962. The state intended initially to tear down the Hoyt House, use the footprint to build a public swimming pool, but for decades the land was left vacant and unattended. There are plans to restore this house. On the property, you can also find the remnants of an ice house, because throughout the Hudson Valley, the ice harvesting industry was very active throughout the 19th century, bringing ice downriver to New York City. Some of the huts used by the Civilian Conservation Corps are now used as public campsites, so you could rent out these huts for camping within the Ogden Mills Ruth Livingston Mills State Park. It is also home to a golf course, the Dinsmore Golf Course, either the third or the fifth oldest public golf course within the United States, one of the oldest golf courses is located within the state park. And here's a picture of one of those early golfers, Mrs. Henry Carnegie Phipps. Carnegies and Phipps's big industrialist families, 19th century. I don't know what her given name was, but I guess in those days in polite society, once a woman married, she became known as Mrs. Henry. So today I think women are better known by their given names. Within Stroudsburg is a beautiful mansion that resembles on the outside the White House. It has its own book called Stroudsburg, Gilded Splendor on the Hudson. Within the Stroudsburg mansion, furniture and designs reminiscent of Kings Louis XV and XVI. The Stroudsburg mansion was owned by the Mills family, built on a hilltop overlooking the river. It was acquired by the state in 1938. The building itself designed by architects McKim, Mead, and White, one of the top firms of the Beaux Arts style in New York City, turn of the 19th, 20th centuries, who remodeled and expanded this house. Completed in 1896, it was transformed from a 25-room Greek Revival style to the Beaux Arts mansion of 65 rooms and 14 bathrooms, as a dock, greenhouse, and farm. Sometimes used for public events and fundraising dinners. Has its own conservancy, Friends of Mills at Stroudsburg, because every good park deserves a friends group at Stroudsburg. Lake Taconic, not Taconic, Taconic State Park in Anscram, New York. This one's 1,569 acres, acquired by the state in 1929. It was donated to the state by D. McRae Livingston in 1929, another member of that prestigious family, with a requirement that Lake Charlotte's name be renamed as Lake Taconic, giving it an indigenous name, and has a public beach on it. Civilian Conservation Corps camp was established in the park in 1933, with laborers constructing the park's water tower, beach, bathhouse, and cabins. The park has 4 full-service vacation rental cottages with heat and kitchen, smaller cottages with fewer amenities, and just plain cabins. So depending on how much you pay, you can sleep in this park. It's a very beautiful park office building, and the water tower is located next to the Taconic State Parkway, Lake Taconic State Park. Next state park is Claremont State Historic Site. It was built by Robert Livingston sometime after 1728 on 13,000 acres, left to him by his father, Robert Livingston, the first Lord of Livingston Manor. Yes, in the British colonial period, hereditary properties were known as lordships, so we did have our own nobility here in New York. The house was home to 7 successive generations of Livingstons, dozens of enslaved people, and paid workers. Donated to the state in 1962. This is the Claremont State Historic Site along Woods Road with its own hiking trails. Within this park, you could find remnants of Sylvan Cottage, which certainly looks much older than it does because of its gray stones, and houses along Locust Avenue with historic period furniture at Claremont State Historic Site. This is one of the jewels of the New York State Park System, Olana State Historic Site, 327 acres, facing the Rip Van Winkle Bridge on the Hudson River. And this park was home to artist Frederick Church near the town of Hudson. Frederick Church hired architect Calvert Vaugh and worked with him to design this mansion, nicknamed the Orientalist style, something a little bit Arabic, a little bit Persian, really named after a place named by ancient Greek historian Strabo, believed to be somewhere near the Iranian-Armenian border, a place called Olana. But before it was Olana, it was known as Siegenberg, Dutch for Long Hill. And part of the appeal of Siegenberg, or Long Hill, are the visual corridors, what is known officially as a view shed, meaning that the amount of development within this view shed is very limited. So when you stand on top of the hill, on the balcony of Olana, you'll get the same views that Frederick Church had when he made his Hudson River School paintings here. This house was then passed on to his heirs. Also, as I mentioned, was finished in the Victorian period, in 1872. From here, you can see the Catskill, Taconic, and Berkshire Mountains. The states of New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont can be seen from the summit of Olana. It was saved from development as a result of Life magazine publishing a photo essay here in the 1960s, which led to a preservation campaign that resulted in the state acquiring the Olana State Historic Site, one of the most unique places to visit in New York. Taconic State Park will be the final state park in today's presentation. Taconic State Park is comprised of 3 sections, 2 large sections and a tiny unnamed section. The northern section in the town of Millerton borders on Massachusetts, where the Taconic Mountains meet the Berkshire Mountains. The trail to Bish Bash Falls State Park within Massachusetts begins in Taconic State Park. During the 19th century, these mountains were used for metallurgy, and within the northern section is Ore Pit Pond, which has a campground. Next to it are the Copake Iron Works, with one of the iron silos covered up by a canopy to protect it from weather damage. Within Iron Pit Pond is a public beach where you can swim, and Rudd Pond can be found in the southern section. Within the park are historical signs that talk about the history of the Copake Iron Works and the iron that was found in the Taconic Mountains here. 1924, landowners Francis and Ella R.K. Masters donated this large farm to the state of New York, and the Taconic State Parkway was created partially as a result to connect New York City to Taconic State Park. Looking at the map, because it's located near the tri-point of New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, this was supposed to be a tri-state interstate park, similar to how the Palisades State Parks are shared by New York and New Jersey. But instead, Massachusetts and Connecticut developed their own separate state parks here. And one of the interesting things I find is that on the Connecticut side is a place called Mount Riga, a plateau that was also used in the colonial and 19th century for iron working, and Riga Lake. I was born in Riga, Latvia. I could not find any information online if there is a connection between Riga the Latvian capital, and Riga, the mountain and lake. But perhaps there was some connection between Latvians or Livonians and this little corner of northeastern Connecticut, bordering on Taconic State Park. This park also has its own conservation group, Friends of Taconic State Park. The highest point within the park is Brace Mountain, 2,316 acres, near the tri-point of New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. And this is the northernmost state park within the Taconic region, which brings this essay to an end. As mentioned before, if you find any mistakes, comments, compliments, complaints, let me know in comments. Give me a follow, give me a comment, and let me know what you think as we celebrate the centennial of New York State Parks. In the next essay, we will talk about the Saratoga Capital region of the state parks, which includes places like Peebles Island, where the Mohawk River meets the Hudson River, Saratoga Spa, with its mineral waters, where you can swim and taste those waters, John Boyd Thatcher State Park, with its scenic cliffs and waterfalls, and so much more, including the Schuyler Mansion within Albany, and the Bennington Battlefield of the Revolution will be in the next video in this series of New York State Parks. Thank you so much for watching this video.